Hey, thanks for joining me. I've noticed lately that my full-length review videos seem to be getting a little bit longer each time, and I need to try to rein that in so I'm still providing all the information I can without it getting out of hand. But in the meantime, I thought it might be interesting to do like a shorter form video here where I am actually following up on some products that I've used over many months or maybe even a year, kind of a long-term summary review of like how it's going. And that's kind of what today's video is going to be. And I kind of wanted to start with the Wave 2 from EcoFlow, which I got just about a year ago, and I'm still using it. I haven't really been using it in a mobile format like in my car very much, primarily because they for a long time they didn't really have a good solution for the venting of the hose, the intake and the exhaust hoses. Well, they now actually have a little window kit, and we're going to take a look at that and see how that works. It's not quite what I expected, but who knows? We'll see if it works just fine or not. But in the meantime, this is kind of what I've been doing with the Wave 2 here. I'm actually using it in my little workshop area. This is a 12 by 12 space, so 144 square feet. And I find that this space, when I don't run this in the summer, gets brutally hot. I'm talking 100 degrees hot. And that is because on this far wall over here, the sun bakes down on that, and there's no insulation there except for what I have just put up there. And that, by the way, helped a ton, because the sun is exposed, or this wall is exposed to the sun on any kind of a sunny day, and we'll get upwards of 115 plus degrees, pretty hot. And so just having that up there really helps a lot. Although it's not perfectly in place, I didn't really do a permanent installation. There's a little bit of an air gap over here where I'm getting, I'm sure, some of that warm air that is leaching back into this space here. But with this, I have got the exhaust, which is the smaller one, going out the top, and it goes into a little 90-degree elbow out to like a dryer vent, and that hot air exhaust gets vented out into the main part of my my horse barn. And that slightly larger diameter tube in the back, or vent tube, that is for the air intake, and that keeps you from developing a negative air pressure in the room where you're actually sucking in outside air when you don't want to be. So it kind of helps equalize the pressure in the room. But that is going basically just right through the ceiling there into something resembling a bathroom ventilation fan cover. It's got a little screen on it to keep bugs from getting in. But this really does do the trick, because really this is the only climate control that I'm using out here. And since it is a heat pump design, it can also pump out heat in the colder months of the year and then cooling in the hotter months of the year, like it is right now, since we are just now ending the month of May and heading into June. Now I'm actually getting the condensate and collecting it in this little 5-gallon bucket, and I periodically just go remove it. Now if this were going to be a more permanent solution, I'd probably move that little condensate line so it drains directly outside and not into a bucket that I have to manually empty from time to time. But this unit does evaporate off quite a bit of its own condensate, so it takes a pretty long time for that to even get about half full. But I find that taking that humidity out of the air in this room and the sort of basic cooling capabilities this thing has in a space this size actually is more than adequate. Now I would say that this Wave 2 is not something that you're going to use to try to cool a, say a 500 square foot space. It's just going to struggle to do that, depending on the insulation and what other factors might be at play. But in a space like this, where it's a 12 by 12, as I said, 144 square feet, I find that it is more than adequate to keep this space cool, despite what would otherwise be pretty brutal circumstances in this room if I didn't have the insulation or the cooling going on. And just removing the humidity from the air is a huge help in this space. So it makes the difference between wanting to work in this room and not during the height of the hot summer months. So I've been very happy with this particular setup. But let's go take this out and find out how that window kit works, which means I'm going to have to pull the vents down and take those and try to put them in my car and see if it works. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we'll want to be using this option for the add-on battery for the Wave 2. So this gives it quite a bit of runtime on its own, and it's a direct DC power. This Wave 2 is already a very efficient AC unit because it can run on DC power. And so when you're actually powering it off DC, you're using a lot less power than a typical kind of window AC air conditioner. All right, let's get this thing out into the car and see if we can figure out how to install that little window kit and kind of see what that setup looks like. All All right, so this is the window kit, and it's not really at all what I expected. I thought it was gonna be something a little bit more rigid or firm, but this is basically just like tent material, ripstop nylon, and it does have some waterproofing on it. You can tell, so that it does provide some level of water resistance in at least in a light rain, and I think they did it this way to give maximum compatibility on windows. But we're going to see if we can figure out how to actually install this. So I think we just kind of put this over the window like this, so that this drawstring here is in the back, and then this loops over the top. Now there's 3 different elastic bands here with Velcro on them. So let's maybe let's cinch down the bottom first. I've already retracted the window slightly. I'm not sure how to get around the side view mirror all that well. We'll fold in the excess material here. All right, and then it's got 2 elastic holes here to cinch around the exhaust tube and the air intake. And there's little flaps that come up that are Velcroed. So we'll have to see how well that holds the tubes in place. All right, and then we've got these 2 little flaps. There aren't any little cinches to keep them in the open position, but I guess once you get the tubes in there, it won't matter all that much. I guess that's how you do it. Let's go ahead and put the air conditioner in there. All right, so I've got the kit installed and I've got the air conditioner inside with the hoses attached. Now it's trying to figure out the most practical way to get the hoses through these little elastic holes here. Let me try just reaching through there. There aren't really any instructions with this kit. I suppose I could pull it through and angle it down slightly so it doesn't get any water in it if it's raining. Well, this one, the elastic actually isn't quite cinched around enough. Wonder if it matters. There's a little daylight there around that one. So I guess it looks something kind of like that. Let's go turn it on and see how it works. All right, definitely not the most elegant looking solution here, but it does appear to be working. Let's go ahead and turn this on. And by the way, you want to use the app probably because it's easier to control the thing. But in the EcoFlow app for the Wave 2, you can basically tell it to use the self-evaporating or self-draining, where it doesn't come out of the drain automatically. As long as the humidity isn't much above 70 degrees, that'll be able to maintain that. But if it gets over 70% humidity, if it gets over 70%, then you might end up with a situation where it can't quite keep up and it will eventually shut itself down and force you to manually drain the unit. But you could, if you wanted to, I guess, put the drain hose in there and snake it down as long as it's hanging lower than the exit point down there, and just drain it right out using the drain hose, depending on how you had it set up. But yeah, I mean, we're getting cool air in here. And the warm air is coming out the top. The fresh air intake is coming out the other side here on the larger diameter. So, and we do have the expansion battery down here. So this is running completely off battery. Now there is an XT60 connector on the other side of this Wave 2 that allows you to connect a solar panel. So I could put a solar panel on the roof if I'm stationary and just drop a cable in somewhere to power this thing and keep this battery topped off. Maybe a couple 100 watts of solar would do a pretty good job. And yeah, then you basically are running this thing off of solar and kind of replenishing the battery as you go. Yeah, nice cool air coming out. Not exactly an airtight solution, but then again, with all this glass, the car is not super heavily insulated either. So, is this a practical solution? I think, in some cases, I think it might be. It's definitely a practical solution in the sense that if you want portability to be able to move this around and use it in various places, this is one of the easiest solutions and most efficient solutions you can get in terms of power consumption, because this thing does not draw a lot of power. In fact, unless it's pumping out heat, you're probably not going to be pulling more than about 275 or maybe 300 watts at the most. So very efficient on that front, but you kind of got to keep it running in a space like this for it to really do any good, because it's just not insulated. The window kit is kind of nice to keep water and bugs from coming in for the most part, but it's not perfectly airtight, and it's more like kind of what you do with a tent solution, I guess, because it is just nylon. But you know, it does get the job done. It's a little fiddly getting this set up with the hoses and getting them snaked through there, but it does work. So, and I guess you'll have to decide whether or not this is a super practical solution in a car or a van or a small RV or something like that. It does take a bit of space in terms of floor space here. So if space is limited, this might be difficult to do, but you kind of got to weigh it. You know, how much is your comfort worth? Would you really use something like this enough to justify taking up the space that it consumes? And then of course the time that it takes to set up these tubes. So I mean, if you're not staying in place very often and you're just constantly on the road, I'm not sure that this is kind of maybe going to be worth the setup time and tear down time and just the fiddling with the ducts and all that. But if you're somebody who tends to boondock in one place and stay for several days at a time, something like this might actually be a pretty decent solution to keeping your space cool, especially when you're sleeping, because that's generally when I would use it, because I don't sleep well when it's hot, and having something like this to keep a sleeping space cool would be a definite bonus for me. So that's how I see it. And right now, by the way, I think they've got some special sales going on, like probably the lowest price this has ever been sold at for the next couple of weeks through mid-June, as I understand it. So I'll put links in the video description below if you want to go check that out and see if that sale is still running, because it is pretty affordable, especially at this sale price. It's quite a bit less expensive than it was last year when they introduced it. So yeah, if you're going to buy one, I think now would be the time for sure. All right, so I think that about wraps up this little update video on the Wave 2. Definitely serves me really well in my little workshop environment. I'm still not 100% sure, if I'm going to use it in this configuration. It really just depends on when I'm going to be able to get out, where I'm going to be staying put for a couple of days. And I think in that case, it's something I would definitely take with me. But if I'm on the move like I usually am, probably won't bother. But definitely for my workshop scenario and being able to move this into a couple different places in an emergency, being able to, power outage where I want a cooler bedroom or office, again, being able to move this thing around is pretty versatile in that regard, and pretty handy for that kind of thing. So I like the versatility of this, but if you're only going to use it for one thing, there might be better solutions if you're just using it for one thing in particular. But if you want to have the option to be able to move it around and do other things with it, something like this is actually pretty compelling. All right, so yeah, hopefully that was a pretty realistic overview of kind of what this thing is all about and how it's been for me. And if you're interested in checking it out, again, leave links below. Yeah, so hopefully you found something of use in the video, maybe got some information out of this. I really tried to be as realistic as I possibly can with this and how you might use it. And I do appreciate you checking this short video out, and hope to see you in the next one. Until then, have fun out there.